Thanks for tuning in and welcome back to the shop. Let's see what we can get into today. Well, I think a good place to start is to see if I can get through the rest of this welding. As you can see along some of the seams here between the floor pan and the box structure, there's a bit of a gap. So I need to go along, now that I've welded the other side, and clamp this together and put a couple more stitch welds along all of these seams. But before we can do that, I need a little bit more welding gas. Nobody rolls bottles that size. Well, that should work a little bit better now. While I was doing that, I was thinking that I should probably take advantage of the weather because it isn't raining right now and it is supposed to rain later today. I want to cut up some material for the next step after I'm done this welding, which is more welding. Surprise, surprise. So I'm going to cut that material now and then I'll come back inside to finish prepping it and doing the welding. The material that I want to get cut before it starts raining is this aluminum sheet. I want to do it outside because it makes a lot less mess outside. I'm going to cut this into about 3 1/4 inch strips, which will then get bent into pieces of angle, and that's going to be the structure that goes across the floor. As you can see on the floor right now, these are just longitudinal stiffeners. There's nothing stiffening it across, which is going to help with any bowing this way or that way, especially when the camper jacks are only supporting it at the outer edges. The advantage of running a couple of pieces of this across, other than stiffening it, it's going to allow me to make sure that the floor pans don't have any bow or hump in them because they'll be held straight by the bottom here. And it also gives me a spot to put a screw through from the subfloor along the box tubes and across on these. There's going to be 5 of these angles per pan section, so I need to cut 15 strips in total and bend them to 90 degrees in my press brake. But I'm going to start with one just to make sure that even though I've done a test piece, that my strips end up coming out properly before I cut an entire sheet.
Of course, to cut aluminum with a saw, we need the right blade. So let's get this wood blade off and get the metal blade on.
I've scribed a line on my aluminum at 3 1/4 inches from the edge, but that's really just a guide. I don't cut that by eyeball. What I'm going to do is set up a rip fence. You may have noticed that I've got 2 numbers written on the blade on my saw, and that is 36 mmF and 38 mmR. That is front and rear clearance to the edge of the saw in millimeters, but that's not front and rear, it's front and rear. That means that I can set up the fence at 38 millimeters away from where I want the edge of the cut, and when I run along that, I will end up with a perfectly good cut along the scribe line without having to watch by eye as chips are flying out of the way. So 38 millimeters is 1.5 inches, so I want to go 1.5 inches past where my scribe line is, which actually turns out to be exactly 4 3/4 inches. So every time I want to make this cut and end up this size, I set up a fence at 4 3/4 inches and I will end up with a 3 1/4 inch piece of aluminum. If you are considering setting yourself up to cut aluminum like this, it is fairly straightforward to do. I'll leave a link in the description to this blade. It does a really good job cutting aluminum. I also recommend a minimum of a 6 amp hour battery, and I'll leave a link in the description for those for the Dewalt saw. And you know what? I'll leave a link in the description for the saw as well.
Using a combination square set to 4 3/4 inches makes repetitive setup very fast, easy, accurate, and repeatable. You'll note I'm not wearing my safety Crocs mainly because I don't want to cut my toes off, but also the hot aluminum chips always find their way through the Crocs. Saw cutting aluminum isn't super fast, but it gives a nice clean cut. That said, let's speed this video up a bit. The aluminum chips fly everywhere and are pretty hot, so make sure you're wearing safety glasses and you may want gloves.
I don't know. Just need a couple more minutes. Hey, did you know that over 80% of the people that watch this channel are not subscribed? Are you one of them? Maybe it's time you hit that subscribe button.
Time for a test bend. pretty good.
Test piece number 1 in place. This is the strip that we cut outside. The strip I cut was actually long enough for 2 pieces, and I've only bent the first one. But this is the piece that we just pulled out of the press brake. All I've done is radius the corners and use the grinder to get a fine-tuned length. You can see in the middle here, got a bit of a gap to pull up, but that is the point of this. This will help squish this and make a nice strong floor that won't bow out and give us the surface to secure the subfloor to. I've got all my blanks cut. Now it's time to stick them in the press brake, turn them into angles.
For those who haven't seen my home-built press brake before, it's pretty straightforward. There's a 30-ton air-over hydraulic jack at the top that pushes down, and 2 smaller pneumatic cylinders, one at each end, to lift it back up. I'm still surprised at how well this basic, non-engineered pile of parts actually works.
Well, now that I've got all of these cut and bent, it's time to get to what I was planning on doing today, which is welding. Got the new gas on. I figured out the problem I was having earlier, which was my welder was set to panel control instead of foot pedal control, which meant it didn't matter what I did on the foot pedal, I got the same result, just having a bit of an impact on the welding. Now that that's sorted out, let's run some beads. That's better. So I'm welding the inner edge of the pan to the box tube, and I'm also welding the side plate to the box tube. So previously I welded the underside of the side plate, and this will wrap up everything on the side plate. So much nicer when things are working properly. So what I'm doing here is I'm going ahead 12 inches and then coming back 6. And hopefully that lets me bring everything in tight without pushing a ripple all the way down to the end. Whoops. Not supposed to do that. Those of you who don't weld, if you've ever wondered why welders put a bend in the end of their TIG rod, it's because you can't pick it up when it's on flat. But if you put a bend in the end, can't see it there, but put a bend in the end, you just roll it, you get something to pick up. If you're a new welder, there's your freebie.
It's nice when you can get into a rhythm and the work just keeps moving along, but it seems that whenever this happens, there's always an interruption. As much as I want to get this build done, helping others will always come first. It's just part of the reality of a slow build. And we're back.
Well, it looks like that's about all the time I'm going to have in this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Whoops. Not supposed to do that.